Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, where we talk bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day and today. Today I'm coming live from an ascent of Arthur's Seat. If I sound a bit breathless, that's why. I'm in Edinburgh. I've been seeing Bruce Springsteen, the boss himself, at Murrayfield Stadium, and I'm recording this the day afterwards. So this podcast is a little bit different than our normal format. We're not looking at a particular game. Instead, I've invited Jon Cohen from Tale of the Manticore podcast to talk to us about the creative process of making Tale of the Manticore. If you haven't seen it, it's a podcast that is a bit of a narrative experiment where Jon takes us on a story and the dice decide the outcome. You must try it out, and hopefully by the end of listening to this, if you haven't listened to it already, you will give it a try. Also, me and Blythy have appeared in the podcast, so you'll have to listen out for that. I am Lord Rabbit, and Blythy, he sees his villainous side, but yeah, you have to check that out to find it. Later in the podcast, Blythy joins me in the Las O Gowrie in Manchester. Yeah, for the first time in a long time, we managed to record in the pub, and with minimal noise in the background, so we've got our wigs on, but don't worry, there's not too much Elvis Costello to interrupt your enjoyment. Anyway, that hill isn't going to crack itself, so I'm going to keep on climbing and rambling. And as for you, well, ramblers, let's get rambling. Welcome to the Zoom of Role-Playing Rambling with me, Dirk the Dice, with a virtual Grog Meet special. Joining me this time is Jon Cohen, the producer of Tale of the Manticore podcast, an audio drama where the dice decide. Hello there, Jon.
Hey, how you doing? You know what, let me begin with a deep apology for last week. Standing you guys up, I got the time change wrong, and I wanted to apologize for anybody who I inconvenienced or who wanted to see that and missed it.
Oh, don't worry about it, Jon. A British summertime confuses us as well. I mean, I'm not sure how much daylight it actually saves, but
well, very gracious, but all the same, my apologies to you and to your audience.
Well, it's great to see you, and we were recalling, weren't we, before we put the mics on, that it's been a while, isn't it, since we've seen each other face to face?
It has been. I think a couple 3 years even.
Well, let the Manticore see the rabbit, and let me just ask you the first question, which is, where in the world are you beaming from?
So I'm in Toronto, and it is a iron gray rainy day outside.
And have you always lived in Toronto?
For most of my life, yeah. I in my professional career, I spent some time in the States, some time in Japan, and some time in Korea. But I've been here for the last dozen years, teaching high school in Toronto.
And where did you start then? What's your origin story? What was the first role-playing game that you played?
My first one was actually BX, and I remember it very, very, very clearly. I don't have a ton of memories from my childhood, but that Keep on the Borderland and the purple box set, I remember it extremely well. It clearly had a big impact on me. Surprise, surprise. But I guess I was 12 years old, and my older brother brought me into it. Probably he must have been desperate for players, because he certainly didn't want to be around me otherwise.
And what is it that you remember from that particular adventure?
I remember Morgan Ironwolf. I remember the Minotaur in the Labyrinth. I remember Hey Rube, which I didn't understand until about 2 years ago, by the way. It was the Errol Otis art that got me in the BX set and in the Keep on the Borderlands. That Morgan Ironwolf, I could have and probably did just stare at that picture for hours. just obsessed. The weapons rack picture obsessed me. That for my 12-year-old brain, that was everything to me. Absolutely.
So that was your starting point. So how did you expand from there? What other games were you playing?
We sort of tried most of the ones that became available in Canada, which I think was a slightly different menu than you had in the UK. Things like Warhammer were really rare here, and GURPS, that kind of thing. We didn't get that so much. We got a lot of the TSR products, Top Secret, Star Frontiers, Gamma World, all of those, which all are kind of related to basic D&D in that way. There was a weird one called Toon that I remember very well, and Villains and Vigilantes with a bunch of Jeff D art in it. And again, the more I think about it, the more I think it was the artwork that appealed to me more than the mechanics meant nothing to me at all. I think it was the artwork. It just either captured my imagination or not.
And what's kept you going? Because obviously we'll talk about the podcast, but at the core of it is that sense of OSR and BX rules, isn't it? So it stayed with you. What would you put that down to?
I guess it comes down to being in a deep freeze like for a long time, because I put down my pencil and dice at about 18 years old, and I didn't pick them up again until the pandemic. Full disclosure, I just couldn't handle the stigma anymore when I was a teenager. I wanted to, have a girlfriend and be in a rock band and do all that stuff. And the stigma of D&D back then in the 80s was I couldn't handle it anymore. So I just gave up, I guess.
That's sad, but you came back to it. Let's move on to the podcast, because it is, for one thing, an interesting experiment more than anything else. If people aren't aware of Tale of the Manticore, can you do your pitch, Jon?
Yeah, I'm famously bad at the elevator pitch. What I kind of say it's the intersection between a dark fantasy novel and kind of presented in an oldie-timey radio fashion with some music and some sound effects and some voice acting, and an actual D&D game. Plot is not known in advance. It's all generated by dice, and so it's a little bit like the radio show of a D&D game that happened. And that's about as close as I can get to what it is.
Yeah. And
how'd I do?
But very good. And I think it's worth saying that it's quite distinctive from actual plays. It's not, you don't get that sense. Yeah. What do you start with? That's what I'm interested in. So you say that it emerges from your gameplay, but you must have an idea of where the plot's going and developing that. So what's the process of producing one of these?
I guess it starts with you have to be the DM and the players kind of in turns and kind of simultaneously. It sounds complicated, but it's actually really, really simple. Maybe the way that sitting down to write a novel is pretty straightforward. You've got a couple ideas in your head, and you start banging keys on your keyboard and something happens. But for Manticore, usually I'll start out with a DM mindset and kind of set out a situation the same way I would if I was DMing a table of players. It could be anything, but as long as there's a conflict in it, it's pretty much good to go. And then once that conflict is established, the farm is in trouble. It could be anything. And then you kind of switch your mental state to, okay, now I'm the players, and I've got a handful of characters that are, because it's old school, it's all rolled up very, very quickly. And then I think, well, if my players have some kind of distinct personality type, how would they react to that logically? And there's just a kind of a back and forth between that DM state and the player state. Like, I don't really have to think about, what would this character do? What would that character do? Because very, very quickly they get their own identities, and I know what they would do. It's really, really clear. And I guess that's the engine, going back and forth between that DM, here's the problem, and the characters, how do we react to the problem? That kind of back and forth, even though it's just me, it's not so different from a table game, actually. I understand that it doesn't seem like that would work out, but it does. It's not hard at all, actually.
So do you record it in segments then? So, and are those segments scripted, or are you producing those as you're thinking of the game like a GM would?
I think here's a a good example of like the medium is the message. Because of the way it's produced, it does change the way it comes out, and which makes it a bit different than a game. Because a game is very, very social. It's very, very improv. We react to the twists and turns right there because we're all right there. But with Manticore, if there's a twist or a turn or the dice shows something unexpected, I can put it down and walk away and think about it on my commute to work, or go have a swim and just let it, marinate in my head a little bit, and then I'll come back with usually a much better answer than I would have come up with on the fly. And just as you say, that's how it works. I'll sit down and start typing a script, and the script and the game, that's all one thing. It's not like I play the game, record it, and then go back and make a script of it. You could do it that way, but it would take even longer than it does. So now I just start typing, and if a character says something, I'm just thinking of it kind of in the moment. If I come to a roadblock, I don't know what's going to happen here, or the dice show that something unexpected is going to happen, I might have an idea and just go with it and keep on typing. Or I might have to go away and think about it. But I guess the slowness of the process, that makes a huge difference, because it really gives you that time to think about it. I've never played like a play-by-mail game, but I'm willing to bet that has a similar quality, where you get these long gaps between turns, so to speak, and it allows you to really think about what you're going to do next. So everything is kind of more deliberate and maybe even denser, because every interaction is meaningful.
Yeah, that's quite a good analogy, isn't it? So you've got a radio play-by-mail experience. It's almost like a solo game book as well, isn't it? Because it creates those
there's a little bit, there's a little bit. I mean, going back to that first bit where I was 12 years old and reading the game books, my favorite part was always the examples of play. I don't know why, but even as a teenager, I remember thinking, somebody should make a whole novel that's one of these transcripts of play. I would read the hell out of that. And well, hey, look, now here I am, in a way, sort of doing something like that. Not quite, but sort of.
You mentioned the characters, and the characters for the fans of the show are the key to it, aren't they? How important do you think it is that you roll the characters in front of the audience?
Because it's BX, I'm very comfortable doing that, and I think it adds to the gaminess of the story. And I'm really try to be conscious of making it a game as well as a novel. Sometimes I'll go pretty deep into an episode and realize I haven't rolled a die, which to me is actually a negative, because I want there to be that gaming flavor throughout, and I want the underlying mechanics of the dice to feel very present. And sometimes I do lose that, and I'll just go off on some kind of, I guess, what would be a role play tangent. But I do want that there. And so I do like the idea of rolling up the characters when I know they're going to be important, at least for a short time, maybe a long time. I don't know. Lifespans tend to be a little short on the show. But if I think, this is a PC, definitely they get rolled up in the open. But again, it's a, how long does it take to roll up a PC in BX? 5 minutes tops, maybe less.
You must have some attachment to the characters. So who are your favorite characters that have emerged from the stories?
Yeah, I really do. When they don't make it, I feel that period of mourning the same way you do at a real table. And the longer you play a character, the more you bond with them. It's such a strange thing to me. I know they're just numbers and scratches on a paper, but somehow you do bond with them. And boy, do you, like, for people who have listened to the show, that there are some moments that are, I guess, like low is the word. And if you can sense that I'm going through something after the loss of a character, it's genuine. Even though I'm recording the thing, like, the script is being written first, and then I go back and record it. But the recreated emotions, they're all real. So definitely I bond with them. And in terms of a favorite, I think in season 1, I think my favorite was Umura. I remember Umura had been alive for a few dozen episodes when somebody finally gave me a copy of the 5th edition Player's Handbook. I was very, very late to that party. and I was looking through it and kind of feeling like this is maybe not for me, but I want to give it a chance, and I was hoping to get a chance to play it. And I remember paging through it and finding an example character called Umara. And it was a kind of a facepalm moment where I thought, oh man, people are going to think that I just read the 5th edition player's handbook and changed a vowel. I guess, I guess when you throw a bunch of phonemes in the air and just let them land, I guess that's going to happen every now and then.
Because as well as creating the characters, you're creating a game world as well. So I'm interested to know how much of that you have got plotted out. So have you got a gazetteer or a map that you're working to?
Right. I guess there's the two methods, right? You can either plan everything and then play in your sandbox, but I do the other one where you start with a point on a map and that's all there is. And then you work out from there. It's just a quantum fantasy map, and it doesn't exist until somebody goes there or mentions it, or there's a piece of lore or whatever. That actually gets sticky after a while, because you start to get these continuity errors, or even just the anxiety of continuity errors, to be honest. So I remember thinking at several times as my map expanded with the story, a lot of it just through characters mentioning, mountains to the south. Well, okay, now there's mountains to the south. That has to be on the map. And I remember at one point, middle of season 1, having to kind of stop all the presses and make sure that my travel distances made sense. All the while thinking, nobody but me cares. Nobody's thinking about this stuff. But I wanted it to hold water and be as genuine as possible. And so I actually made sure that could character A travel from here to there in the time that I give them. And so, yeah, I had to kind of warp my map just a little bit to make sure everything made sense. And as it went, I would sketch it. So I've got a few binders here that are full of hand-drawn maps, and eventually I tried out Incarnate and made them look a little bit better. But yeah, that world is... It's still mostly fog of war with, now a fairly detailed set of kingdoms set in it. But yeah, nothing exists until it gets a mention. I don't know. Is that how you do yours as well, or do you play in like a published setting or something else?
I tend to go towards published settings because I tend to not have ongoing campaigns. I tend to have bursts of campaigns that last for 10 sessions or so, and we may revisit them later. And talk about that kind of time span. I'm trying to avoid spoilers in this because I want people to discover it themselves. But you made quite a significant decision at the end of season 1. So what was the thinking behind that? Because I know for quite a few fans, it took a bit to getting adjusted to it.
It did. So you're talking about how I leap forward a couple of decades, yeah? Yeah, and with all new characters. So there is a reason for doing it that way, and I know that a bunch of people said that they had a hard time reconnecting and rebonding. So here's what I was thinking when I made that decision. You ever pick up a book and it's as thick as a triple-decker sandwich, and you think, nah, that's a lot of book. Maybe I don't want to read that much book. I'll go for something thinner. A big book chopped up into 3 sections to me would be more appealing, only because that big book looks like a lot of work. And so I thought to myself, if I would like to get some new listeners for season 2, they might look at season 1 and think that is a big book, that is a big sandwich, and I'm not sure I can eat the whole thing. So I wanted to kind of front end season 2 with the message saying, you don't need to have listened to season 1. And in fact, sometimes I recommend that people start with season 2 because I know what I'm doing better in season 2, and it just picks up speed much smoother, faster. And although it might be interesting to hear me learn what I'm doing and have well, I suppose that's something in season 1. It's definitely you're along to watch me or listen to me learn what I'm doing in season 1. It's got its merits, but in season 2, the story just starts. So I wanted to keep my game world, keep the lore that existed, because it's kind of set in my head. So I didn't want a complete reset. So I just advanced the clock 20 years, I thought, well, that'll do like a soft reset on this world, but it'll keep some of the lore that's there. I won't have all of the anxiety about continuity because I've just learned the world over the last few years in season 1. And so, but all new characters, and I wanted to try a different tone. And so I thought, well, maybe this could be an urban setting, and I'll get into that, I guess, thieves world kind of vibe. And I thought, well, this would be it's just a different flavor of fantasy. I don't know, what would you call season 1? Is a kind of a classic / epic, and somehow got into dwarven lore, which was never my intention or even my interest. It just happened. But in season 2, I wanted something completely different. And so I thought, okay, it's going to be rival thieves guilds, and it's going to be urban, and I'll explore this city that I mentioned a few times in season 1, but never went there, never explored it, and see what that looks like. And I thought the interactions can be much more faction-based and person-to-person based rather than sort of classic D&D encounters. So for me, because I'd been doing one thing for a couple of years, it was a change of pace, but it did necessitate a whole new cast of characters. And very early on in season 1, this is a spoiler, but it happened so early, I think it's okay. There's a TPK, and so my original handful of characters immediately wiped out, and I have to go with the second set, which was a surprise. But that's also what makes the show kind of engaging for me, is that I really don't know what's going to happen next, and I want to keep it that way.
Also, as part of production, you use very good sound design. So what was you thinking behind that, and how does that work out? Because you do differentiate, don't you, between the actual game and then stepping outside for you to do your dice rolling by using the sound design. So how did you come about that idea, and how do you make that work?
The idea for having the sections, here's a DM commentary section, and then let's come back to the narrative, and then try and make that happen in a sort of cinematic way with music and sound effects. The idea for that is not mine. That came from the Iron Realm podcast, which was a huge inspiration for me. And as far as I can tell, the creator, Abel Enzo, he's the guy that came up with this mode of storytelling, as far as I can tell. And it was during the pandemic, and I just stumbled across his podcast and loved it. And it really inspired me. And one of the reasons why I started making my own was because I thought, I'll find several dozen more that are just like this amazing podcast. And then it turned out there were none. But I really like the unpredictability, the experimental nature of it. And I thought, well, I've got a bit of a background as an amateur sound engineer, and I used to have a career as a working musician, and kind of looking around my studio here, and I thought, I've got all the pieces to make this podcast that I was hoping to find someone else had made. And then when the pandemic came, it was just clearly, this is what I should be doing with my time. All of the signs are there. I've got this nice microphone. I got a bunch of guitars. I have an embarrassing amount of guitars here. And I could just put all my hobbies in a stack. And instead of making rock music, I could try and make something that sounds a bit like Diablo and put it into a podcast. And so that's how it came together. It's just all of my interests just converged on this one spot, which is Manticore.
The music adds a lot to it, because I listen to Tale of Manticore when I'm out having a walk, and I can feel my pace increasing, and it's because of the intensity of the music. I walk about 10 times faster.
That's awesome. That's some of the music, I should say, is not mine. I think I'm about 70-30 of my own scoring, and then if I need something with certain instruments or that's just outside of my abilities, I'll use Creative Commons music.
Yeah, your music and Ken Hite's voice makes me walk faster. One of the things that we mentioned right at the start, and you were quite quick to do this, and it was about, people don't want to listen to podcasters talking about podcasts, but here we are. But you were very early on quite keen to reach out to the podcast community and to try and work out ways in which to find audiences, because that is a challenge, isn't it, as a podcaster?
It really is. It really is.
with lots of content available. It's how do you reach out and connect? So what are the strategies that you found, John, to find new audiences?
Yeah, still looking to some degree. Some things have worked, some things haven't. But you're right. When we first met, and I was just completely green and had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to make the show. I didn't know how to publicize the show or promote it. I think I just threw out something on Twitter to say, "Hey, let's all get together and talk about how we can promote." And that's how we met. The truth is that there is no good or easy way to promote, and it's not like YouTube where there's clickbait or people are going to invest 15 seconds to try out your thing. There's a bit of a commitment or a buy-in to get somebody to even try out your podcast. I can only imagine what it's like for novelists. Here, would you like to try my novel? It'll only take you 45 hours. That's got to be a hard sell. Well, I guess we're somewhere in the middle because YouTube, you can test stuff out. You can test out 100 things in a week and pick your favorite. But anyway, so to get people to listen to podcasts, I thought, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And there are a few things that have worked and a few things that haven't. So word of mouth, of course, is the best. But even that, you have to have the ball rolling before word of mouth does anything, because the reality is when you start, you've got 3 listeners and 2 of them are you, right? How many downloads did I get today? 7. Yeah, that's how everybody starts. And then you build very, very, very slowly over time. At least my experience is that it's a slow build over time. I'm sure some people have some spike where they get a moment of publicity. For most of us, you build slowly over time, and you win fans one at a time. A bit like old rock bands. Actually, I think that the parallels really hold water. It's a little bit like being in a punk band or a hardcore band. You put in that time, and you tour and you tour and you tour, and slowly you grow a fan base. And I think it's kind of like that. For podcasting, though, I do ad swaps, and so some people complain that there's an ad in the middle of the show and it breaks up the flow, and I'm sure it does. But that's also one of the only ways that I have to grow an audience, and it works quite well. So I'll just reach out to some podcasters and say, "Hey, do you want to drop a 30-second spot in my show and please play my spot?" And that's how it works. And then, you have to rinse and repeat over and over and over and over and over. But I think it's cumulative because those ads are permanently embedded. So somebody who's discovering my show tomorrow is going to hear an ad for a podcast that, that got set 3 years ago. And that podcast hopefully is still around. I know that some don't make it. Again, it can feel like yelling into the void sometimes, especially when you're starting. So that works really well. And kind of by accident, I found that by reaching out to ask people to be a voice actor, that had a similar effect, actually, because a person that would do a voice for my show, they might mention it to somebody else, or they might listen to it themselves. If they like it, they might mention it to somebody else. And so I found, again, by accident, I just needed voices. I found that grew my audience. And also it made the show better. I think somewhere around, I don't know, in the episode 20s, I think, of season 1, which sounds pretty late for things to start cooking, but I do think that things start to cook somewhere in the 20s. And it's because I started to get a handle on voice talent and what could be accomplished. And I guess I started to learn how to write dialogue a little bit better when I was writing for other people, and knew that I was doing that. And so I think that the show got better because of that. And also it just expanded the number of invested people. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, you'll always get podcasters who are keen to appear on other podcasts. I mean, if you want to expand the role of Lord Rabbit, you go ahead. I
probably will.
So you've returned over the last few years to gaming, produce the podcast. Have you managed to get some face-to-face play or play with others? So what's the last game that you played?
Yesterday, actually, I found a live table game here in Toronto. Toronto's a pretty big city. I guess we are 5 million people here. You'd think it would be a snap to get together a table of old school gamers, but actually it's very, very tough. There are a lot of games here, but they're all 5e. So I started out trying 5e. That's what I could do. And so there's a place here, it's like a cafe, kind of a RPG cafe, Magic the Gathering cafe. And so they host D&D games, and I went and I joined a group, and great people, wonderful people. But I found I didn't enjoy 5e, and it was kind of an after work thing, and so I'd go there a little bit tired, and wanting to get my D&D fix. But I found that I was leaving disappointed. It just moved so slowly for me. Again, no shade on 5e and people who play 5e. A mechanic is a mechanic, but for me, it didn't work well, and I guess the look and feel of 5e was wrong for me, and I think it influences the way people play, and Critical Role influences the way people play now. It felt a little cartoony and a little Marvel superhero-y, and again, obviously people like it, people love it. It's, I guess, the most popular thing, but that wasn't what I was looking for in a game. Was like I don't enjoy a power trip kind of game, and that's what it felt like. Just first level flinging fireballs around. I want to earn it. I want to earn it the hard way. I'm a weirdo that way. I do like mortality and danger and high stakes, and even a sense of horror and fear in my games. But that's just my own taste, and everyone's got their own. And so I remember when I started, I was really kind of angry about new age gaming or new style of gaming, and I didn't like it, and I was on a bit of a warpath. And at some point, I mellowed out and just realized, you know what, just everybody can game the way they want to, and it really doesn't hurt me at all. I think I was upset because I was looking for that old school game table, and I just couldn't find it. I just kept on finding all these other things that were kind of looked like it, but were not it. But eventually I did find a bunch of people with the same interests, and we're playing an old school Essentials game a couple of times a month, and it's super fun. I'm loving the hell out of that.
Yeah, there's something about old school Essentials that has captured the spirit of BX, isn't it? And represented it in a very understandable and credible way. It kind of works, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And of course, if you play old school Essentials or BX, well, same thing really. I think every table just hacks the hell out of it. So you're really just making up rules on the fly. And I think that's why it moves so quickly. A 3 or 4 hour session of BX, probably half a dozen things happen. Whereas with 5e, I found that in the same amount of time, it would be like a combat happens or 2 social interactions happen. It just moved too slowly for me.
Yeah, and I think with 5e as well, I enjoy playing 5e, but it's remembering all the stuff, isn't it? As a player and as a GM, and making sure that you're optimizing the best point to do things. Whereas OSC, there's something fatalistic about it. Just throw yourself at it and hope it works.
Yeah. I did find myself looking at my character sheet a lot playing 5e, where playing BX I never do. We forget to update our character sheets because they just don't get pulled out unless somebody says, I need a wisdom check. What's your wisdom? And I don't remember. It's 11. That's the only time these things come out. Whereas in 5e I find that the mechanics are more to the front or something. There's definitely more of them. But to be fair, boy, do I know BX. I just remember it because I memorized that book as a child. So it's in here. I don't have to flip and turn through pages to look up a thing. I just know stuff now. But 5e, boy, I had to look up everything. And also, I'm an old man now, and they made the font very, very small in those books. I remember being under these fluorescent lights, like reaching for my Dollarama glasses, going, oh my goodness, I have to put on my old man glasses to read this. Yeah.
So I've asked you what the first game you played, which was BX. what was the
Yeah.
last game you played, which was Old School Essentials. And I'm going to ask you, what is the game that means everything to you?
God, this is such a toss-up for me because I was thinking about this question and I thought, my first and my last are the same. That's a cheat. So I'm going to present a tie for my everything, and I want to highlight two systems that people may not be familiar with that are both brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It blows my mind that people have come up with these completely different takes. Here they are. One of them is Tana Pigeon's Mythic system, which is a GM emulator designed for solo play or for GM-less play. You can use a group, 3 players, no GM. I've done that. It works great. The brilliance of this system, to oversimplify, but to explain quickly, is the action and subject tables, which if you're familiar with things like Ironsworn, you'll be familiar with these. 2 tables. One is you roll a verb, and one of them you roll a noun. So you'll roll percentile dice, and you'll get something like defend, and then you'll roll again and get a noun, and it will say something like pride. I don't know, whatever you get, and then you have to take those 2 words and make it make sense. It's like story cubes in a way, only with 100 sides per die. And it is brilliant because it makes you think in ways that you wouldn't otherwise, and it really is like having another person there pushing you or making limitations that inspire your creativity in that way that limitations really can do. Sometimes I tell my students, if somebody says draw a picture, you'll be paralyzed. But if somebody says draw a picture of a banana and you can only use charcoal, now everybody just goes. They know what to do, and their creativity is unleashed. And it's the same way with Mythic. It narrows the goalpost so much that you do focus and come up with something brand new. So that's Mythic by Tana Pigeon. She just put out Mythic 2. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure it's brilliant because Mythic 1, it's a stroke of genius. It really is. And the other one that I want to emphasize, and it's really influenced the way that I think about game design myself, is The Quiet Year, which is a game where you use playing cards to uncover prompts. And so it's kind of a story building game and a map building game. And in The Quiet Year, you kind of draw a map as you go, and as you turn over cards, events will happen. You turn over 3 of clubs, and it will say a stranger comes to your town bringing bad tidings. What are those tidings? And then you just make it up, and it's another brilliant system that just reinvents what role-playing games can be for me completely from the ground up. I remember being obsessed with The Quiet Year, played it a bunch, ended up playing it in my classrooms with 30 people. Still do that. Actually, I've become kind of the teacher who plays the big map game at the end of term. It's almost a signature of mine now. I think both of those, Mythic and The Quiet Year, both of them genius and in very different ways. But I just didn't think that role-playing games could be reinvented like this, but it has been twice. So if anyone hasn't heard of either of those, highly, highly, highly recommend. Genius.
I've not heard of either of those, but I'm aware of Ironsworn, and I can see how structure and that narrative prompts would appeal to you, particularly in your experience of producing the podcast.
Right. It's funny. I don't use a GM emulator, even though I do this solo play podcast, and the only reason is I didn't know that there was a solo scene. I came in completely ignorant and blind, so I'd never heard of Mythic, and probably several months into making the show, I learned about Mythic, but by then the format was set and it was working, and I didn't want to make some abrupt change where I brought in a whole bunch of mechanics. And again, especially with the show being an audio medium, I'm really conscious of it's got to be very, very simple. It's got to be brief and simple and snappy, because I'm reaching people through just the one channel of audio. And maybe it's because I teach for a living. I know that too much information can make people numb to what you're saying. So it's got to be very, very simple, easy. Actually, that's why I use BX. I don't have any, like, I have a special love for BX, but the reason I chose it is the simplicity. I could have used Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or 5e or whatever, but BX is just the right one for radio, so to speak, as far as I can tell.
On behalf of all of us here and all of us who couldn't make it this week, thank you very much, Jon. It's been great listening to you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the support you've shown. And of course, I'm a regular listener of your show, so I hope you never stop.
Are you looking for a D&D podcast with a dark side? Something more like Game of Thrones and less like Monty Python? Tale of the Manticore is part dark fantasy audio drama, part solo D&D RPG. There's no plot armor here. The dice make all the important decisions. Join me as I resurrect the excitement, wonder, and emotion of old-school D&D. Made for a mature audience, Tale of the Manticore is both a fiction and a game. It's the story where chaos rolls.
Thunderphase! Welcome to the room of role-playing rumbling. Believe it or not, we're back in the Las O Gowrie. It's like having a drink after the longest drought. Hello there, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
I can't believe it. Have we managed this? We're back in the pub.
We're back in the pub. And I've asked the band to turn the music down.
Yeah, we've asked them because he said that it's complaints.
It was a bit too loud, wasn't it?
It was a bit too loud. And it was like, what was he say about like Latin jazz?
Latin jazz, yeah. Not the normal kind of thing. People normally want Elvis Costello.
Early period Oasis. So we spurred you some Latin jazz and we've got time for Thunderphase. We've asked our listeners to provide us with some questions and we're just going to go through them. Got them all on a series of cards there.
No.
I've shuffled them. Hang on, let's give them a bit of a shuffle. Yeah, here we go.
So they're apparently at random.
Shall I read the first one?
You read the first one. Go.
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
This one is from Steph.
Ooh.
GM using accents, voices, yay or nay? So I'll repeat that for the hard of thinking. That's a GM using accents, voices, yay or nay?
Well, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because when we played Steph's game, he did accents.
He did.
He's very good at them, wasn't he?
He was.
I worry about accents because I can do a variety of accents.
Go on, what's your aim?
But they very, very quickly turn into a different accent if I'm not careful. So it's just sustaining it. But my problem with it is sustaining it. Yeah. Because I can do like an Irish accent. Before I know it, it turns into Billy Connolly. And you're thinking, oh, no, it's changed. So I think that's the problem. And also, I'll tell you what the problem is. As you know, online, we play with an international audience. One of the problems is you're playing with American people, you do an American accent, and they're thinking, do you sound like Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins? Do you do the American equivalent of Dick Van Dyke?
I was going to mention the same thing because I feel quite confident doing accents with people I know. Yeah. But I think with online gaming and playing with people across the universe, you encounter people who you're thinking, I can't, with all good conscience, do an Irish accent because I'll sound like,
it'll quickly move into parody.
It will,
I know what you mean.
Top of the morning to you.
Yeah, that's the worry, isn't it? It depends on the game, I suppose, as well. Some games where they're a bit more light-hearted, you get away with it. But again, something a bit more earnest would
I think what we both do is a switch between, don't we? Yeah. So we switch between doing the voices and then a bit of reported speech.
Yeah,
so
that's what I do.
Yeah.
I do a bit of the voice, but because as we've discussed before, I think doing the voices all the time descends into the amateur dramatics thing. And the game becomes something else as well. And it can be a bit off-putting for people as well, because not everyone's confident about doing it in character, are they?
No.
So I think, like I said, it's all right to do bits of an accent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. I suppose it's great if you can do it, then it's all right, isn't it? But I don't know if everyone can.
What I've started doing, though, is rather than using accents, is just vary the tone of my voice to indicate different characters.
Yeah.
You know, so I've started to develop a range that they don't necessarily have an accent, but they're very, they have like a bit of a vocal quirk.
Yeah, I can do a bit of an accent, but I can't do long term. There is the risk it will shift into. We go from New York to Texan to Midwest, and to Welsh, to Welsh, and then to Billy Connolly.
Okay, go on, you go Thunderphase. We need to do that.
Thunderphase, yes.
Thunder.
Yeah. Oh, right, we have to read your handwriting. What stuff did you used to do that you don't do anymore? I presume this is referring to role playing.
Yes.
And we're not going to ask Mrs. Blythy about this.
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? What did I do that I don't?
Well,
I suppose it's about learning, isn't it? What have you learned?
I suppose,
yeah. Through experience. Go on, have you got one?
Well, I suppose one thing I don't do anymore, but it's not quite said that. We don't really worry about miniatures or anything like that anymore. We used to. I think when we were younger, we used to worry about all that kind of thing, and I don't anymore.
Yeah.
I suppose the one thing I think what I used to do, try not to do it now, is I used to kind of, as a games master, I used to kind of shoulder it all. So I used to feel as a games master, I had to provide everything for this game.
Yeah.
And what I do now is, and I'm doing it at the moment because I'm preparing a couple of Monster of the Week games, one for Expo and one for Go Play. And that's a game where you look at it and think, all right, I've got a scenario and I've got some scenes and I've got a plot and I know what's happening and I've got some notes, so it's all there. And if the players just sit there looking at me dumbly, something will happen. But equally, I'm thinking some of the gaps here are going to be filled by the players. There's a bit of fluidity to it, which I didn't used to do. I used to be very, it's all on me. It's all on me to provide them with entertainment. But I suppose what I've learned now is that's not necessarily the case. It is on me as a games master to provide a scenario. I'm not saying you turn up and go, well, let's just all improvise.
Yeah.
But there are certain sort of, not gaps, but certain points in a scenario now that I look at and think, that'll be okay, because the players will fill that gap.
Yes.
It's given them some stuff, and generally they'll fill it. And then also I'll kind of run with it a bit and it'll be okay. Whereas I think in years gone by, I would never have done that. I would have everything nailed down.
I can see that in playing your games now, that you are more open to letting the players run with an idea rather than having control. I think an instinct has changed. I think I used to feel, and I can sense this fairly recently, that the revealing stuff to the players. I always had the sense that things should be like not a trick or a twist, but somehow they'd have to discover it and everybody go, and that to me was like the ultimate goal.
The big reveal. Setting up the big reveal.
I was aiming for that essentially, like M. Night Shyamalan, whatever it's called. It was the Sixth Sense. Oh, right. And there is some pleasure in getting that, but I think what I'm more open to doing is showing the players everything that's there, and then discovering it and being less precious about, I'm held some of this back because I want you to discover it.
And that comes from experience, because what you realise is if you start to set things up in a game where you think, right, I want the big reveal, or I want this, or I want that to happen, generally you can be disappointed because it won't happen like that.
Yeah.
And again, I suppose that comes back to what I'm saying, that it's that sense of control, isn't it, that you set up a scenario and you think, now I want at this point, an hour from the end, I want this to happen and it to be a big reveal. And then when it doesn't, you feel slightly deflated. But what you learn, I suppose, is...
And you know what? I think that's something that we've learned over the last 5 years, isn't it? It's not something that's different from when we were kids. to now. It's something that we've learned through practice.
Oh, yeah.
Over the last 5
getting
years.
back into the hobby, I think I did that of trying to nail everything down.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's a good phrase I read somewhere, you might know who said it, that no scenario survives contact with the players. Yeah. No scenario survives first contact with the players. And that is true. Once you get your head around that, and I think it took me a bit to get my head around that, because I wanted it to be, I used to want scenarios to be as I planned them.
I think
they're not.
It's a variation of Mike Tyson's famous saying that everyone's got a plan until you hit in the face.
Go on, next one.
When are we getting a Flashing Blades episode? And this is from...
Who's this from?
Kia.
Really?
Kia.
Are we?
I think we should. And there's something that attracts me to that whole Three Musketeers setting.
Yeah.
But we have reached a point, haven't we, Blythe, in this podcast cycle? We've been talking about this, haven't we, off mic recently, that we never talk about a game that we've not played, but we're now reaching a diminishing bottleneck where there's fewer games that we've played that we can talk about. Yeah. So we need to make time to play more games. Yeah. And we're already playing a lot of games.
We're playing a lot of games that just the games we're playing. Yeah. Which may not be games that we want to talk about on the podcast, so we may have already talked about them.
Yeah.
I think Flashing Blades would be good, because there are a few games like that, aren't there? I mean, there's Flashing Blades. I've got a little game called 17th Century Minimalist.
Oh, yes.
Which is like a Musketeers type game. And then there's On Guard, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Because we did play On Guard.
Yeah,
back in the day. It's not, I mean, whether it's a role-playing game, it's an odd one, isn't it?
No, it's probably closer to Aegon than it is to Flashing Blades.
Yeah. And there's things like 7C, and those kind of 16th, 17th, 18th century type piracy games. So.
It's quite attractive, that swashbuckling world.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's got a rock, paper, scissors type mechanic.
Yeah. So you never know, Clark. You might get what you wish for.
You might get it again.
But be careful what you wish for, because who knows what we'll say about it.
Yeah, exactly. Go on, next question.
Next one. Oh, right, okay. This is from Jim from the Raspy Raven.
The Raspy Raven.
Have either of you ever completely or heavily improvised a session? How did it go? Looking back, why was it a success or a failure? And what would you have done differently?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I am.
We've talked about loosening up control. You like to have some degree, don't you?
Well, as I've said before, one of my strange quirks of role-playing is I do quite extensive notes, and then when I'm running the game, don't look at them. Apart from the monster stats, obviously, you look at those, but the notes I've made, I think, I've not even looked at the notes.
No.
But that's not improvising.
Yeah.
I think you, back in the day, I think you used to improvise a lot.
I used to do it all the time, yeah.
Back when we were kids, I remember you improvising a lot, because some of the plots in your RuneQuest games got so incredibly convoluted that at the time I don't think I realised. But now, looking back, you were just improvising. That's why they got so complicated. It didn't make sense. Stop making sense.
It was a bit like Lost, I started off with a concept and I had no way of concluding it.
No, it was really good, really compelling, really intriguing, but actually couldn't tie it all together at the
end. and I mean, define improvising, because I think to some extent we all have to improvise. Like we were saying earlier, the points, aren't there, where you hand over to the players can, and you have to make it. I think the only recent, and I say recent, it's a few years ago now, fully improvised game was that game of Blades in the Dark that I did over 12 hours.
Yeah.
You didn't play that, did you? But I literally had nothing. There was nothing there. But I say there's nothing, but the game mechanics provide everything to you, don't they?
And I think that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That some games are, like Blades in the Dark, is designed almost to be improvised, because the structure and the cycles of play and all those kind of things that make it a bit odd in terms of a role-playing game. So some people react, not badly, but react to it a bit. Doesn't really feel like a role-playing game. It feels more like a kind of board game in some respects, but it has role-playing elements to it. But those structures support improvisation, don't they?
Yeah.
It's not as though it's a game of Call of Cthulhu, for example, where you go, okay, you're in New York, it's 1920. Let's see what happens. I mean, that just seems like a really odd thing to do if you improvised Call of Cthulhu. What would you do? Well, you sit down and you've nothing.
Yeah.
But you just improvise. But I think Blades in the Dark, by its very design, lets you do that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it is an intriguing idea because I've got a game called Dungeon World. And Dungeon World, which is powered by the Apocalypse, that has an improvisation thing where I think you start in a room in a dungeon and you work it from there, you build it from there. But that always, I don't know, it makes me feel slightly nervous.
Yeah.
I suppose you could improvise a dungeon bash kind of game, you could improvise. But there's certainly some games you'd think, I'm not sure that would work.
One of the things of doing Blades in the Dark over a sustained period of time is it can have callbacks to earlier scenes and earlier characters and bring them back into it.
Yeah.
I think there's a problem with improvising, though, is that inevitably, I don't think people are as good at improvising as they think they are. Because I think you always end up going to default places where you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's improv, but ultimately you're just going to go to a comfortable position where you think, wow, I do this kind of thing all the time. Therefore, I think I've done that where, as you say, in a scenario where it's all gone a little bit off the rails and you then start to default to certain tactics and certain scenes that seem, to get you through it, I suppose.
If a box turns up, you know that
Dirk is improvising.
I'm improvising. You know that I've got nothing. If you present him with the box, oh right, okay, and the box is moving. Oh,
it's like a cat, isn't it? There's a scenario in the box, and also there's not a scenario in the box at the same time.
Yeah, whose turn is it? Is it mine?
It's yours.
It's
my
turn.
Your turn.
Okay. This is from Dave F. Who would you convert to the hobby and why? It could be a famous person or someone you know. I always think it'd be interesting to try and convert Danny Minogue. Only because
I convert Kylie and then we play D&D. What could be better?
I think it because famously or infamously Danny Minogue fell out with Jack Villeneuve, apparently because he kept playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Really?
Yeah, so, yeah.
Is that true? You're not improvising now?
I'm not improvising. There's no box involved.
Jack Villeneuve?
Jack Villeneuve.
Is he a racing driver?
A racing driver.
So he's a Formula 1 racing driver? One of those high-octane careers in the world. And yet, he still likes a game of D&D.
That's the reason why she broke up with him. Because she was after some bedroom action or whatever.
And he said, no, I'm on bordering on 11th level.
Yeah. No, I think she got it wrong. I think it was a computer game, and she kind of boxed it into. He might have been playing Doom or something.
And surely Gran Turismo. She's doing a driving game. Jack Villeneuve.
That's a bit.
If you were Jack Villeneuve, would you do a driving game? Because isn't the worry you'd be rubbish at it and think, but I'm a Formula 1 racing driver, but I can't do, you know what I mean?
I think
it's like getting Brian May to do Guitar Hero and finding out he's no good at it. Same thing, isn't it?
I think she thought Doom was Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, I see.
And that's why I want to invite her round to show her, this is Dungeons and Dragons.
Danny, this is Dungeons and Dragons.
And maybe she might have had an epiphany. Well, right, okay. Maybe Dungeons and Dragons isn't that bad.
Still falling out with Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah.
I don't know who I'd convert. I don't know. I don't even want to convert people anymore. This is the interesting thing.
Yeah.
I think, is it the person I think is bordering on conversion? My daughter, who is she's a big fan of computer games. She's a big fan of the kind of TV shows I like. But she doesn't want to do role playing. But she has said, if I buy the Free League Walking Dead game, she will give that a go. So
have you bought it?
No, I will. I might do when I'm not backed it, but I might buy it. Yeah.
When it's in
when it's available.
Retail.
When it's available, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because when you read that question out, you immediately think, yes, I'll convert people, of course. But I'm not sure I do want to convert people anymore. I don't care.
No, we've gone from converting people when we were younger to necromancy, awakening the dead, isn't it? You know, people who were already
converted. Yeah.
Reanimating
the dead.
I think you're on a. It's difficult to convert people. It's like Dirk Jr.
Yeah,
it'd be great, wouldn't it, if he was into? Well, but would it? Because my dad was into model railways, and he used to take me to these model railway things. I had no interest in it whatsoever. I think for Dirk Jr., he gets his pleasure out of trying to get a noise out of a light bulb and sampling it.
Yeah. It's
let him do that, and I'll do my thing.
I know what you mean, and I think we spent a lot of time in our youth trying to convert girlfriends and wives and all sorts of people to role play. It never worked, and actually, it could be a bit depressing. You can get a bit down, I think, because I can remember that where you sit down and you think, okay, I'm going to do D&D. And these people are going to love it, and they don't love it. And then you leave thinking, "Oh God, did I do something wrong? Why don't they love it? I love it. Why don't they love it? How can they not love it?" And it leaves you sort of feeling a little bit sort of deflated. Yeah. So I'm at the point now where you think, well, there's lots of people around who we know who like it and play it. So if people want to play it, fine, but you don't really have to convert.
Stick to necromancy.
Stick to necromancy, yeah.
Next question.
People say it's a dying art, but I'm not so sure.
We've not done Thunderphase for a bit.
Do you want to do Thunderphase?
Are you ready?
Thunderphase! Right. Just edit that in.
Yeah.
This is from Vaughan. What things wind you up from players and or from GMs? Pet peeves, irrational irritations.
Oh, right. How long have we got?
It's a new podcast in this, isn't it?
But is there though? Because I'm quite accommodating.
I am more laid back now about gaming than ever. So one of my pet peeves used to be when people gave their characters stupid names.
Yes, yeah.
Really irritating when people would give it. You set up a scenario, you've got this world, you've got these characters, as a GM, you've done whatever, and even I suppose as a player, and then somebody gives their character a stupid name, and you think, "Oh, come on!" Because once you've done that, it sort of breaks. But I don't think I care now. I don't care now.
Yeah,
I just think, whatever.
Yeah. So you got like a high fantasy setting, and they call the character Derek or something.
Derek or something a bit daft, like Deathblade Derek, something, like that kind of thing. And you think, But now, I suppose now I'm more laid back about it. But that certainly used to be one of my pet hates. That player, and I know the GM should be impartial, but that player was a target. You made yourself a target in my game if you do that. Not now though. Now I don't. I just think, whatever. It's fine.
One of the irritations I have, and I still hold it, and don't encounter it a lot, but you do encounter it, is that thing where people feel like you're responsible if a dice rolls incorrectly. As though it's some slight upon you as a person. That's not very good, is it?
I've got an 80% chance of doing this. You roll the dice and you roll 82. It's just, oh no. Like, I know, but I had an 80% chance. This is just dice,
Yeah. So, you're not doing very well, are you? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
That can sometimes needle me. And the converse is true. The people who feel very smug when things are going in their way.
Punch the air, yeah.
Well, not so much punch the air. They say, there you go, that's how you do it.
Oh, yeah. That irritates me a bit. Yeah, I know we have met people who do that. I'll show you do it. That's how you do it. Well, it's not how you do it, is it? It's just, we both had a 50% chance. We rolled a D100 each. I rolled 63 and you rolled 45. It's not, that's how you do it, is it? Yeah.
The boys are back in town.
That is annoying. Yeah, that is annoying. Yeah, and there's a showy off attitude because you roll the dice well. Come on.
There's always an element of that, and some of it is kind of low level bants, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's when it becomes ingrained, and Also, when the dice are against you, and they are random, so they're not really against you.
They're not really against you.
They're not really against you because it is random. But that feeling, that transcendental feeling that luck is not on your side.
Yes. Yeah.
That somehow the cosmos has decided that
tonight's the night when you're never going to make a roll. Yeah.
And people start like, oh, right, okay. Yeah. Right. Are you turning up today or what? That kind of,
yeah. So if it's like a cricket match and you keep dropping catches. It's not, is it? It's not. I'm just rolling this polyhedral dice and it comes up with numbers. Yeah. There you go.
So if I've got a pet peeve, that is
annoying, actually. Yeah, I would go along with it. Daft names. The worst player would be the player who gives the character a daft name and then is very, very smug about rolling.
If only we knew somebody who was like that.
I need
Kevin. Right, here we go. Next one. Okay. Oh, this is a topical one, this.
Oh, go on.
A new Tunnels and Trolls. Are you interested?
Oh, yeah. I saw this. Yeah, I saw it.
So this is in the news. Rebellion, the owners of 2000 AD and other graphic novels, have bought TNT, Tunnels and Trolls.
I am interested, but it does raise an interesting secondary question, doesn't it? I read the post that they'd done about it, and they were a little bit cagey. Well, my reading of it was a bit cagey about whether they're going to change it.
Yeah,
weren't they? Because they didn't say they were going to do that, but they didn't say they weren't. I thought it was interesting.
And it's whether because obviously Jason Kingsley, who's the owner of Rebellion, he's got a background in role playing. He had Out of the Mist as a fanzine, which I found a copy of in the garage. When I found all those fanzines in the garage a few months ago, Out of the Mist was one of them. So he's got a long time association as a role player and role playing gamer. So it'd be interesting to see what he's doing. It's obviously like a passionate idea that he's come up with. So.
It's an interesting game, isn't it, Tunnels and Trolls? I kind of played. We played it a bit a few years ago when I got the deluxe version.
Yeah,
quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I always enjoy it. It's it's just a fun game, isn't it? It's its own fun. So just be interesting.
That's a game where you could get away with a silly name for a character.
Yeah,
and it would be okay. Wouldn't annoy me in Tunnels and Trolls.
It's to be encouraged.
It's to be encouraged. Yeah.
Right, whose turn is it? Is it mine?
Is it mine? I think.
Yeah. Okay.
There's 3 here. These are from Fabio. Do you prefer tactical or narrative games? I suppose I think a mixture.
Yeah.
These days.
Well, this is a thing, isn't it? I just mentioned fanzines and finding these fanzines in my garage. And all of the debate back then in the mid-80s, so early to mid-80s, in these fanzines was about the idea of the role gamer, R-O-L-L, and the role gamer, R-O-L-E.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And this idea that...
never the twain shall meet.
Never, the people who were obsessed with the tactical choices and the Irvings who were just about killing monsters and acquisition of stuff.
Yeah.
They're the spotty oiks, whereas the purity was in the role gamer who was exploring the character and the world building and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Those debates have continued, haven't they, for 30 odd years, and I think what happened with while we were in deep freeze is that became indie games versus old school games. So indie games that had mechanics that supported ROLE type play compared with role game. But I don't know. I'm with you. I think it's halfway between.
I like a bit both. I like a game that includes both elements. I think too tactical and it becomes too much like numbers on a sheet. That kind of thing, but equally to narrative, can get a bit. It feels like there's something missing.
Yes, yeah. Well, we've said that, haven't we, about some of these formal games that are very much like Aegon was mentioned, haven't we?
Yeah.
There's a place for them, and I've enjoyed playing them.
Yeah.
But they are very abstracted.
Yeah.
And I like a bit of a halfway
I do.
between.
I like to know like what my character can do and what dice I have to roll to do things. But equally, it's nice to have some narrative things where you can be a little bit creative. But equally, kind of too narrative. I think in a way that's why I kind of fell out with Fate eventually, because I always felt a bit too narrative, and I found that just a bit frustrating. Everything just becomes a bit loose and a bit like kind of put your aspects into everything, and I didn't quite get on with it in the end. Whereas, but equally, if it was just loads and loads of numbers on the sheet, that can be equally off.
And I think Aegon and Blades in the Dark, which we mentioned before, they at least try to frame it, don't they, and limit some of those choices. But even so, I sometimes find those are a bit. It's probably a bit too much for me.
And I think it's why I like Free League games so much.
Yeah,
because I think the Free League games do a really good job. Vase and Tales from the Loop. That kind of thing. A really good job of being narrative, particularly Vason. A good job of kind of being narrative, but equally, there's a bit of game in it as well. A bit of dice rolling. You look at your character sheet and it makes sense in terms of what dice you have to roll to do things and that kind of thing. But equally, there is some narrative aspects in it that you can play around with. So it's like in Vason, you've got that thing with the journey, haven't you? And preparation, where on the journey to the mystery, you can come up with. You meet an old friend, or you know someone in the village. That the players are allowed a bit of narrative freedom, and that's good. But it's not all like that. It is locked down to some extent with a game.
Is it about the levels then? So there's that gritty level of the blow by blow of what's happening, and then there's a bit of a higher level, which is kind of overlooking the whole field of play, and then there's a higher level that's like a very structuralist approach. I think those are the ones that I feel. Not that I don't like them. It's just that I feel less comfortable with those highly structuralized ones.
And also, I think they have a limited appeal because I think one of the things with heavily structured games is ultimately the structure can wear a bit thin.
Yes, yeah.
And get a bit tedious because you think, it's this endless, it's this cycle, isn't it? And I know that sounds a bit odd because you could argue that all role-playing games are the same cycle.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a haunted house on the hill. We'll have to go there and investigate. It's the same thing in a lot of
Yeah.
Every game's got a dungeon in. It might not be a dungeon. It might be a building you've got to get into. So I think we commented on this when we played Master and Athlete. You always had the same cycle of you investigated, then there was a location you had to get into.
Yes.
And you got into the location and you found clues in the location. Then you went to Egypt and ultimately there was a location. You had to get in there. In fact, and we thought it's the same thing. So I know all games have cycles.
Investigative phase.
Yeah.
Then break-in phase and then confrontation
But
phase.
I suppose what you're saying is that when that structure and cycle is really prominent, it perhaps wears a bit thin.
Yeah. Or there's like an expectation that everybody has to talk around it. So you set the framework out and
pretend it doesn't exist.
Well, no, you're very aware that it exists. So, okay, let's set out what we want to happen in this scene and we'll put these things here. And I know that all that's going on, even at like a lower table level when you're rolling a blow by blow. But there is something about, right, let's set this out. So in this conflict, one of the outcomes you want is this to achieve.
Yeah.
And okay, let's roll to see that hasn't been successful. Therefore, that level of abstraction I have difficulty with sometimes.
Yeah. But no, I think I agree. Generally, there's a sweet spot, isn't there? Of tactical and narrative in a game. And some games are too tactical and some games are too narrative, but just that bit in the middle where you think there's a bit of both there.
Yeah, there's enough going on.
Enough going on narratively. I've got a bit of freedom narratively, which is great, but also I've got a fallback of the tactical game rules kind of thing. Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's determined by, not just by the mechanics, it's about the world that you're in and how comfortable you feel in that setting and world and the choices that you make. Anyway, what's the next one?
Second question from Fabio. I think it's 3 here. He says,
Cheeky three. Cheeky three.
cheeky 3. Cheeky. She's a bit cheeky. But then we say it's cheeky, but we're letting get away with it. It's up to us, isn't it? Really, it's not his fault. Question 2, is there a snobbery against D&D in our community? I like how you've written D&D.
D&D 5e, isn't it?
Is it? It doesn't say
5e. I think I missed off 5e.
Oh, right, okay. Is there a snobbery against D&D 5e in our community?
So there's a lot to unpick there, isn't there?
There's a lot to unpick.
Our community.
The minefield, that, isn't it?
Let's start with our community. What community is this?
Does he mean by that? I suspect, I may be wrong, but I suspect what he means by that is old-timer gamers. So people who have been into it for a long time, either got back into it or been into it for a long time, and 5e comes along, and 5e is very popular with the youth, isn't it? Yeah. It's popular with the youth. Is it a snobbery based on, I've got dice older than you, etc., that kind of thing?
Yeah. So is that, it goes back to the fanzines again, the Irvings. I encountered this a little bit. You know, when we first started the podcast, episode 6, we started talking about Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. And it has to be said that Dungeons and Dragons has never really been front and centre part of our world ever, has it? We've never.
Well, I would say it's more front and centre now than it ever has.
Yeah, exactly.
Because not so much 5th edition, but, you know, as I recently discovered Dungeon Crawl Classics, Old School Essentials.
Yeah.
They're all versions of D&D. I would say D&D is now more significant on my gaming landscape than ever, because I am playing and enjoy some of those D&D variants, if you like.
And when we go back to that episode 6, we were enthusiasts about D&D 5e because you said, and I quote.
I know what I said. You're going to quote it. I think I said it's the D&D. It's the game I always wanted D&D to be.
Yeah. And we were criticised. We got comments to say, I do hope that this new trend of talking about 5e does not continue, because this is meant to be an old school podcast. What we found is that we played it a bit too much, didn't we? And we started getting to the reeds of it a bit, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And that's part of it as well. There's that thing of the personal experience kicking in, isn't it? Where we played Storm King's Thunder, and then I ran Storm King's Thunder. I went in out and then did Dragon Heist. And I think I said to you, by the time I'd run both those campaigns, which was probably about 3 or 4 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I said, I'll never want to play 5th edition again. But that's not really 5th edition's fault. I suppose that's just the fact we played a hell of a lot of it, didn't we?
We played a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I suppose, is it reflected in, when we look at Grogme a few years ago, you'd always get at least one D&D 5e.
Yeah.
Now you never get them.
No.
But I think there's a lot of games out there, aren't there?
Yeah, I think it's a snobbery thing. I think it's more the fact that D&D 5th edition is what it is.
Yeah.
It does a particular thing. And you could argue it does it well. But it doesn't do everything. It does a kind of high fantasy, powered up, tactical, superhero type game, really, isn't it?
Hang on a minute. If you're doing this, then that means...
Yeah. If you can do that, I've got a reaction, and I can do this and that, and then I can have a free action.
Yeah, and it turns out that I've got a hat that I can put on at this point. Yeah. That means that I can float above this and avoid it.
But that is what it is. I suppose the snobbery kicks in because it's very popular.
Yeah.
It's that problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very popular. And it is people's first port of call into the hobby.
Yeah.
And there's that thing where people will just stay with 5th edition. So there are people who just play D&D.
Yeah.
That's all they play. And that's sort of where that snobbery comes from. People look down at people, go, you're just, that's all you play. There's far more to the hobby than that. That's it. It's not really the game's fault. And it's not playing the game. Because if you have a game of 5th edition, you know what you're getting. Because that's what it is. You know, it's like complaining that a curry's too spicy. But curry is spicy. That's what it is.
And also, it's this assumption that everybody has to be a hobbyist as well.
Yeah.
It's perfectly acceptable, isn't it, to play a game. Just have it as something that you do rather than being, absorbed and totally obsessed and spending
every waking hour thinking, recording podcasts in pubs about it.
Yeah.
Or submitting 3 questions, Fabio.
Three questions.
Three.
What's the third question?
Yeah, third question. Question three.
Question 3.
You have a positive love of RPGs, apparently. But are there any that don't float your boat? I think one game that doesn't float my boat, and again, the odd thing about this podcast is it's a record of our contradictions and changing opinions. But I think one that doesn't float my boat now is probably Fate.
Right.
I went through a strange kind of relationship with it where I got into it. I thought it was really good. Then I played it a few times and eventually started to think, I'm not sure is that good. Because it annoys me that the aspects. It makes heavy weather of a role-playing game for no discernible benefit.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, the rules read like a self-help manual. Yeah. And ultimately, when you come out the other side, you think, I don't think that's any better than any other role-playing game. No. And yet it seems like hard work. It seems hard work to play. It's hard work to run. And it does the thing of assuming that you can always come up with conditions, you can always come up with compels, and you can switch around your fate point. And I just think it's hard work. And it might float some people's boat. For me, it doesn't.
The games that don't float my boat it's usually, when I look at like a convention list. So you go to a convention, you look down a list. It usually is the horror ones. And I'm not squeamish.
Yeah.
But there are ones that I just think, do I want to... I'm not sure how keen I am about cult and those kind of things.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I suppose there's a difference. Yeah, that's an interesting difference though, isn't it? That I suppose what I've focused on is the system. Because there are games where the system might be great, but I suppose you look at the content or the theme of it and think, nah, not for me.
Yeah.
Which is different from Fate, for example, because it's a generic system. You could construct a setting that would really appeal to me. So begs the question, would the system appeal to me if it was in a setting?
I'm quite open-minded about systems. For me, it is about setup. If I read a pitch that said, you are Winnie the Pooh and his chums going through 100-acre wood, and you are... it's setting
that is horror.
It's set in the cast of Desperate Housewives or whatever, and some
of that kind of rubbish. I know what you mean. I recoiled from that, where someone's gone completely gonzo and wacky, and you are playing the fireman from Trumpton. Hugh Barney McGrew. It's specifically for 7 players. You must play the fighter. You're playing the fireman. Remember when we went to that Stabcon, and
the only thing left.
She said to us, we said, any role-playing games? Because there was board games. So, any role-playing games? Oh, they're on the board. They're on the board. It's quite dismissive.
Yeah.
And we looked, it was Trumpton, the role-playing game.
Yeah.
And we both thought,
oh my God.
No. Do me a favour. You remember Wendy Miller?
And I'm sure that people have a lot of fun playing those type of games.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, cool.
But it doesn't float my boat.
It doesn't float our boat. There you go.
Okay, here we go. Next one. This is from Old Scouse RPG.
Oh, yeah.
Neil.
Okay.
And this is very specific, this one.
Okay.
Will you ever run a sequel of the Luther Arkwright from Convergence 2017?
Only you can answer this question because you ran it. I can't comment.
Well, I suppose a general approach is running sequels, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are there any games in your repertoire that you would like to? You're not a sequel person, though, are you? You're a fire and forget, aren't you?
Well, one shots and then mini campaigns. Yeah. You don't do the series. You do the kind of convention, 3 games in a convention thing. I don't tend not to do that.
Yeah. I like the idea of doing a revival of that Luther Arkwright thing, because it was quite memorable, because it's quite a long session, and we met a lot of new people for the first time.
It was good. It was at Convergence, wasn't it? Stockport.
Stockport. Yeah. But I do like going back to old characters. It'd be good to see them sometime later. and revisit them. And again, like I was saying earlier, there's some pleasures to be had in having callbacks.
Yeah. Although with a sequel, there is always the problem so much time can have elapsed.
You've forgotten.
Well, you've forgotten also. You just don't. It doesn't float your boat.
You don't float your boat
anymore. Yeah. So, are you going to do a sequel?
I think I will. It'd be good, wouldn't it, to do it at a particular point in time to regroup those people who did it, because you had a shared experience at that particular point, and revisit it. I think there's something to be said to that.
There you go. It's going to happen.
It's going to
happen, old Gouster. It's going to happen.
Go on, next one.
Oh, it's from Wayne Peters.
Okay.
Have you ever had a bad session that was entirely your fault?
Oh,
of course not. It's a silly question.
It's so much a perception thing, isn't it? Because I can't remember many bad sessions, but where it's been a bad session, it's been a combination of things that have occurred during that session, or some bad behaviour of somebody that you've taken against.
I think sometimes my World of Darkness experience at Expo.
Yeah. Very formative.
It was very formative. But I sometimes look back on that and think, was that really my fault? Because I could have, and this is an interesting kind of take on it, because I think the spirit of the question is, and this is common experience of a bad session. Your game's mastering, it all goes wrong. Something goes wrong. You lose control of it. Some of the players are difficult, and you think, well, it's all my fault, really. I should have taken control of it. There's always that, going back to what I was saying earlier, that sense of the games master's in control of the game. Therefore, a bad session is the games master's fault. The games master's lost control of it or not done what they should have done. But I sometimes wonder whether, as a player in that World of Darkness game at Expo, which was terrible. But it was terrible because I didn't really take control of it.
Yeah.
I should have engaged a bit more with it and taken control. And when the games master said to me at the interval, are you all right? Are you enjoying it? I should have said, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not, because certain players are quite domineering and bit in your face. And I'm not enjoying it. And I don't think the guy next to me is enjoying it either, because he seemed a bit like me. He seemed a bit put off by it. And I think, in a way, maybe ultimately it's tempting to think it's the other people's fault for being like that. Well, really, maybe it's my fault as a player for not being open and saying, not really enjoying it because of the behaviour of one player in particular and the way that that's influencing some of the other players.
Yeah,
I didn't. I just said, I'm fine, and just carried on. And really, that's my fault, actually. Isn't it?
I think as a player, you have more capacity to destroy a game than a games master.
Yeah, you do really. Yeah.
Because as a games master, sometimes you if it's getting out of control, just stick a box in it.
Stick a box in it. Absolutely.
And then you go back and.
But I do wonder, well, looking back now, as you said, very formative experience. But I wonder whether really I could have done more to rein that game in a bit.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So it just got worse and worse and worse.
Right. Let's have another one.
It's your turn.
Is it? Right.
I think it is.
Yeah, I think it is.
We've lost turn. The turn order's gone, hasn't it? It's like Roll20. The API's gone.
The API's gone. Yeah. Let me just select your tokens again. Oh, hang on. Well, I'm not in this one. Yeah. Anyway. Right. What accoutrements? I didn't expect to be saying accoutrements.
Is that how you pronounce that correct?
I don't know.
Would you rather I start something else?
What's that?
Would you rather I start something else?
Oh, no, it's fine.
Don't worry.
We just recorded something, so it's fine.
No,
it's fine.
Okay.
You're okay. If you can put up with us.
Right, you have to put up with us.
I'm just looking for a pint. I'll just come down on a train and I'm looking for a pint.
Yeah, you enjoy your pint. So what accoutrements do you need at the gaming table as a GM and player to ensure you have an enjoyable experience? And this is from Shannon from Canada.
Games Master screen.
It's interesting you say about a Games Master screen because I went to a convention earlier this year.
Yeah.
And the Games Master had a Games Master screen and he folded it up. I'm not going to
Folded it?
And he said,
brought it to fold it up?
Yeah, folded up so he could reference it. And he said, I'm not going to put a screen between me.
Oh, I am.
I felt rather, ashamed.
Did you?
I felt shamed by my, a bit like Adam, that I felt I had to cover myself up with.
I think I'm all in favour of it. I don't mind a screen. If games, I don't mind. Why would I mind? You get them, innit?
But what are you hiding behind there?
Well, the notes and the monster stats. Because you don't want to see those because it spoils it.
Is it not like the Wizard of Oz?
No.
You just behind the
it's
curtain.
not like the Wizard of Oz.
And
you're just playing a game with your mates. It's all right. Stop making some psychodrama out of it. It's just a piece of cardboard with some tables
I don't feel
quite handy to have. And also it means they can't see your note.
Yeah. See, I was cured of my blink. I was cured of my blink thanks to Albert and the Wizard staff.
Yeah.
Because I spent a lot of time. I don't even remember, I did a game of Vert.
Oh, yeah.
And I created a load of cards, laminated them. I just spent a lot of time creating character sheets and making sure that they were illustrated and finely tuned with a lot of background information. And I created a lot of like little props and everything, a lot of blink. It didn't go great. It wasn't a great thing.
The blink, the accoutrements did not help.
The accoutrements, I even stuck a box in it, and that didn't help either. It was the accoutrements really kind of concealed the fact that there wasn't a lot to it. Or earlier that day, played the Strange cipher system, similar setup. He wrote on a piece of A4 the characters. He didn't even have a pair of scissors. He ripped them, handed them over to us on a little strip. And that was a really great 3 hours.
And I think, joking apart, although I like a Games Master screen, I know what you mean. I don't think you need anything really. Some of the best games I've ever played and the best games I've run have had no accoutrements at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I'm running Monster of the Week at Expo, and that's a game where it's all theatre of the mind. I'm not going to Games Master screen for it because there isn't one, and it'll just be people sitting around the table with some dice and some character sheets, and it will be okay. It'll be fine. I've run that game before and I've played that game before, and there's very little in the way of accoutrements and bling, and it's fine.
I think there's also kind of an arms race as well that can sometimes occur at conventions of accoutrements, you know, that you feel like
I've got laminated cards and laminated miniatures and this and that and all the other. And I think with those sorts of things, because you've taken the mickey out of me recently because I've produced a couple of big plans, haven't I? The people in Reef Graphics at work who do a Starship plan on a huge A1 sheet. But I've done that because it fits the game. So I've run a traveller scenario where it is important that you have a plan because they have to kind of plot out how they're going to defend this settlement. So it's important. But I wouldn't do a big plan unless it was significant, unless it was central to the way the game's going to function. I think what sometimes happens is people have lots and lots of bling and lots of stuff, and it doesn't really figure in, or it's not significant in the way the scenario is operating. It's just window dressing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. If it's just, ask yourself the question: is it absolutely necessary? If it's not necessary, don't do it. If it's necessary, do it. There are some games where you do need a map, and you do need tokens.
And also, you should also say, if you find it fun doing all the accoutrements,
if you find it fun,
do yourself out.
Absolutely. If you really want to spend your days laminating stuff, fine.
Yeah, you do that.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah. But they're not. It's strange, really. In some ways, despite saying I like a Games Master screen, I sometimes feel more comfortable running a scenario where I think I really don't need all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's particularly true as well. This is slightly different on like Roll20, online.
Yeah.
I get very nervous when an online game relies on a map or relies on tokens, because I worry about the tech going wrong, or things bombing out, or the fog of war disappearing. You know, that kind of. It's like when I was running Virtual X. I think it was Scott was playing my Dungeon Crawl Classics game, and I brought the map up, and he said, "Oh, should we be able to see all the rooms?" And I went, "Oh no, you can't see anything." He said, "No, I'm joking." I thought, oh god, you know. Yeah. So all that as well, isn't it? The more there is to go wrong.
Yeah.
You know. So it's like even going to convention, if you have to have a map. You go to a convention, you've got to have a map. You think, I've got to have that map in my bag. I've got to get that map to the convention on the train in one piece, because it's so important to the game. Yeah. Whereas if it's a game where you don't need any of that, actually it's kind of more relaxing. Yeah. I'd say it's the opposite. The less accoutrements I need, the more relaxed I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way I think about it.
Next one. What's the best biscuit?
What's the best biscuit?
There's a lot to be said for a Dundee cake. Do you still get that?
Dundee cake? What is a Dundee cake?
It's like a Dundee cake. It's like a biscuit, like a chocolate biscuit with
like a biscuit. Yeah, but what?
It's like a chocolate biscuit, like shortbread with chocolate on it, with
do you think so?
Sugary back.
Oh God, no!
So they remind me of the 70s.
That's too much.
Too much.
Too much. Did you shortcake? No.
See, I like a hobnob because it's like saying hobnob.
I'm not a massive fan of biscuits. See, I quite like a Viscount biscuit.
A Viscount, yeah.
I like a Viscount biscuit, but some would. They're into that area with a club biscuit, aren't they? Is it a biscuit? Or is it a chocolate bar?
Yeah.
I like a Jemmy Dodger.
Yeah.
But I tell you what I like. Can't resist. If you took a packet into my house, I'd finish them off in an evening. Party rings.
You like a big party ring.
Party ring.
So having said you don't like a biscuit, you've got a full array of biscuits.
Not really, no. I don't go and buy them.
Would you buy a crisp or biscuits?
Crisps.
Crisps,
yeah. Crisps, definitely. Yeah. But party rings, I like them.
Yeah. I like hobnob in the same way that John Lydon likes Country Life butter.
Oh, right, okay, this is interesting from Tristan. Where is your comfort zone for the number of sessions, session duration, playing context, for trying out a new system or setting? I immediately think 6. 6 sessions for trying something out. I don't know why, but somehow 6 pops into my head.
Yeah,
about 6 sessions. I think we traditionally it's about 6. Yeah.
1's not enough.
No, 1's not enough.
2?
2's not enough. Some used to get. I think some. I instinctively think about 6. I think in the past when we've done things like, we'll try some Deadlands, or we'll try this, or we'll try that. I always think about 6.
Yeah,
might be a bit more. Might be 7 or 8, but minimum about 6.
Yeah,
for some reason. I don't know why, but that just.
Some people commented when we said, "Oh well, we've done a 10-session campaign."
Yeah,
people feel, "Well, that's a short campaign." It probably is, but it just feels natural cycle, doesn't it? Of 10.
It's enough to get you through a game and get you into the longer term aspects of the game. I think that's my feeling on it. It's like a lot of these things. You want to try a game. Do you want to commit yourself to 2 years of a campaign? If it's a new game, you're just going to go, I'll run this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I like it. But 6 or 7 sessions is enough to experience a bit of character development, some of the longer term aspects of a game that you don't necessarily get in a one shot, but equally not commit yourself.
Have you ever got to the fourth session and thought, I've had enough of this, haven't I?
Yeah. Maybe it's 4. It's the answer 4.
Okay. We're coming up to the last one now.
Last one.
Okay. When did you last leave a piece of crucial information but managed to save the day and were the players suspicious?
I don't know.
See, I ran a game last year, Call of Cthulhu game, and I made a massive cock up. A massive cock up.
Okay, go on. I'm intrigued. Was I playing in it?
Yeah, you were.
Was
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I wasn't suspicious.
And what happened was, it was Paul Fricker's game. You know, the one that was set on board a train.
Oh yeah.
So there's like we did it in 2 sessions, didn't we? So the first session was you were investigating this.
Yeah, investigating, then you end up on a train.
Train.
Second bit, train.
And there were 2 people involved. Yeah. And somehow I got mixed up in my head. The person who was the victim and the other person.
Okay.
Right? So I got the names wrong. I transposed the names.
Right.
But once I committed to the fact that the victim's name was a particular name and the other person who was with it, I had to, all the way through it, change it round. You see what I mean? And I don't know what happened. I just, somehow it got muddled up in my head as I got there. So he discovered it. And
well, this is interesting because this demonstrates the power of the games master, doesn't it? Because I do remember that game now, and I thought I was just being thick. I just thought I was being thick because I didn't quite understand part of it. But then when we got onto the train and it all started happening and all people started doing sanity, I forgot about that. But there was a point, I do remember it now, there was a point in that first session where I thought, I must be being really dim here. I can't quite tie this together. But then things happened and it moved on.
yes.
So I wasn't suspicious. I just thought I was stupid. And that's the power. You see,
That's the power.
you say
of the
you
game.
don't want a games master screen because you want to be all friendly, but this demonstrates the power of the games master. You might as well get a big screen and hide behind it because your players aren't suspicious when you make a cock up. They just think they're stupid.
Oh, I'm not understanding.
I don't understand this, but I'll tell you what, I'll keep quiet because I don't understand it. I don't want to say I don't understand it because everyone else might say, what is there not to understand? So I do remember that. And I wasn't suspicious. I just thought I was an idiot. I mean, I possibly am an idiot, but just a particular idiot on that.
And there are times in investigation games. I'm not the greatest at running investigation games where I forget to tell you a crucial bit of information.
Yeah.
But I do think you can kind of retrofit those. You can go back and say.
I don't think I've ever missed out. I don't think I've ever done something like that. But I think what has happened occasionally is, and again, it is investigative games that are the hardest things to kind of put together. I think what I've done is a player has pointed out quite innocently a contradiction or a bit that doesn't quite make sense. Like, why would he do that then? When he had access to the money all the time, why would he do that? And I think, oh, that's a good point. Actually, I haven't really thought about that. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Never mind. You know, that's happened. It's not so much I've missed a piece of information out, but I've had the odd point where I've thought, oh yeah, actually, they could have done this the villain, for example, could have done this in a much easier way. I've just not seen it.
Yeah.
And the players innocently pointed it out as if it's a question, as if there's some deeper meaning.
Yeah, it's deeper. Yeah.
Why would he?
Why is he doing that?
Why would he kill her with a knife when he had a gun?
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Anyway, he's a monster. He's a Shoggoth.
Yeah, you're on a train.
You're on a train now. There's a Shoggoth attacking you. Oh God! Because I think it's interesting, isn't it, that both are examples are investigative games. They can be the most difficult games to put together and run because there's a lot going on. You know, going up to the tower on the hill and kill the ogre. It's a bit easier than something investigative. You've got to remember different characters' names and different characters' motivations and think about why they've done what they've done. And sometimes perhaps miss out the fact that they could have done it a different way, but you've just not seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there you go. We've done it. We managed to get away. We get away with it. We're not in a cupboard. We're in an actual pub. We got away with it.
They've turned the music down for us.
Yeah. We could put it down as success.
The barman turned the music down. A spectacular moustache, hasn't he? Yes. It's impressive. Brave, I think. Brave moustache, isn't he? A really good moustache. Yeah.
He's committed to it.
He's committed to it. You don't see him these days, do you? Moustaches. They're not but
a byproduct, aren't they? But this one's a proper commitment.
Byproduct. Accidental moustache. It's a definite moustache, yeah.
Right. That's another Thunderphase. Goodbye.
It's your local.
So that's the end of the podcast. Just on my way down Arthur's Seat now, so I did survive it, just in case you were worrying. That guy in the Las O Gowrie, he was actually coming down from Scotland himself, and he was in Manchester to see Manchester United. He was on a pilgrimage. He was a big fan of Alec Ferguson and what he did at Aberdeen, and he'd come down to the Theatre of Dreams to watch a fixture at Man United. So there you go. At the time of recording this, the end of May 2023, I'm about to go to UK Games Expo, and more about that next time. But if you are going, then please come along to the Repair Shop seminar, 1:30 on the Saturday, that I'll be attending along with Dave Patterson from Frankenstein's RPG podcast, Steve from Orlanth Rex's Gaming Vexes podcast, and Paul Fricker from the Good Friends of Jackson Elias. And we'll be looking to revive a game that has long gone past its best buy date. Right, I'm going to go back and put this out. So until next time, thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to patrons who make this possible. Some more shout outs next time. But until then, adios, amigos.